In broad terms, I'd identify 3 or 4 current challenges at the moment. I think although this has been a topic of much concern over the last 30 years, somehow planning still hasn't managed to address the questions of formality and informality in cities of the Global South. Large parts of, as we know, of cities of the Global South are in so-called informal settlements, and planners seem unable to address that and to cope with it. There still seems to be a very powerful rationale in planning for wanting formality and really order, if you like, is a very favorite word of some planners. And I think that in a sense prevents planners from addressing properly questions of informality at scale in cities. There's another critical dimension which has to do with the addressing related dimension, but addressing questions of inequality in the city. And I think that this is where planning has to step back from the city. There are things that can be done at the level of the city, but there are also things which have to be done at the national level to address these questions of redistribution. In most parts of the world, not just the Global South, are experiencing a huge diversity in their populations through historical processes, migration. We've seen cities becoming increasingly cosmopolitan in their character. And so the questions of inequality are not just about rich and poor, but also about questions of ethnicity, of caste, of class, in addition to class. And I think that this is a very big challenge of how to make planning inclusive at scale, at the level of the city. And I know in an Indian context that is clearly one of a huge challenge that planners face. And I think that something that the final issue I think is important that runs across all of these 3 issues is how you engage collectively communities in the process of addressing these questions in partnership with the state. And when I talk about engaging, I mean an active engagement, engagement of community processes, so that state and local communities can find solutions together at scale. And I think the question, I keep using the term at scale, but I think that is our serious challenge of how to scale these things up to make meaningful changes in planning. IIHS has an enormous role to play. As we know, IIHS is committed to the much like the DPU, to the formation of practitioners for the coming generation of city building. And I think that in the philosophy of IIHS, we find all the sensibilities around addressing questions of informality, the question of equality, and the question of inclusion in cities. And so it's very exciting, I think, a very exciting opportunity to take a new look at planning education and its implications for urbanization and city development in India. I think one of the most interesting challenges, and where I think DPU has a lot to contribute in this dialogue, is the focus on building the reflexive practitioner. And this is, I mean, someone who has to be useful and who can really engage in the real problems of the city, at the same time in a way that is reflective on their practice, on the underlying assumptions that drive so much of policy making and planning today. And I think this is a true challenge of how one finds a balance between theory and practice, and a critical theory and practice in developing this new kind of practitioner, this new urban practitioner that I understand IIHS wants to contribute to development in India.